Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you and welcome to our Sundays with Luchita series. My name is Claire Motsinger, and I'm the Curator of Community and Collections here at the Millicent Rogers Museum. This is the first part of the series here at the Millicent. Next Sunday, January 26th, please join us at the Harwood Museum of Art for the second part of this series. Today we'll be talking with three artists from our Channeling Luchita exhibition, which you are seated in right now. C. Marquez, Margaret Thompson, and Maya Torres. Thank you so much for joining us. I would like to begin by briefly acknowledging the fact that we at the museum are located on ancestral lands of Taos Pueblo, also known as the Red Willow people. We are grateful to be here and have the opportunity to collaborate and work with the contemporary people of Taos Pueblo, whose ancestors have stewarded this land since time immemorial. Some quick additional thank yous. Firstly, our curatorial team for Channeling Luchita, which was quite the effort, and they put so much into making this amazing project happen. Bob Parker, Dani Kamas, Deborah McLean, and myself. All 10 artists who participated in the show, thank you so much. That includes Lynette Houses, Audra Elizabeth Knutson, who we have today, C. Marquez, Dean Pulver, Rick Romancito, Josh Tafoya, Margaret Thompson, Maya Torres, Tsetsen, and Olive Terrell. Thank you for participating. We'd also love to thank Taos Abstract Artist Collective. We were joking earlier that they push and they make things happen, and they certainly made that happen here. It is sort of a phenomenal effort. Yes, absolutely. It is a phenomenal effort that you all put into it. Our TAAC board members, we are so grateful to you. Thank you for everything that you do. We would also like to thank our collaborators at the Harwood Museum of Art. It is without their show that this show would not happen, and we're so willing and always game to figure this out with us and collaborate in a really special way. So thank you so much, Harwood team. I'm just going to pass it off really briefly for another announcement.
Hi, I'm Lynette. I'm on the board of directors of Taos Abstract Artist Collective, and I want to make a brief announcement. The collective is now partnering with See You Next Thursday to facilitate an auction of artworks that will be contributed to whoever is in need of the fires in Los Angeles. We will need to be partnering with a 501c3. The deadline is today, but we're really hoping some of you will consider donating a work of art to this, and you can find out more information on our website, taosabstractartistcollective.org. Thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to briefly introduce this project, Channeling Luchita. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen the show before, but in case you haven't, this show is a response to the retrospective show at the Harwood Museum of Art, Luchita Hurtado, Earth and Sky Interjected, that presents the incredible work of Venezuelan-born artist Luchita Hurtado, who is a part-time resident of Taos. Our show here at the Millicent Rogers Museum seeks to recognize Hurtado as part of the artistic community of Taos through the work of contemporary artists working in the area and the state more broadly. In doing so, a list of 10 artists was brought together to result in the grouping of wonderful artwork that you see in these two galleries here at the museum. We have 3 of these artists here in conversation with us today. I'm going to briefly introduce you all, and you can introduce yourselves more fully later, but I'll do a brief part. Starting at the end of the table, C. Marquez lives and works just outside of Taos, New Mexico. They create installation sculpture from tall, tumble mustard plant material and natural pigment sketchbooks. Using raw, natural, site-relevant material, they honor processes of deterioration, weathering, charring, soaking, staining, and intricate handwork to develop the pieces over time. The works are inherently impermanent, attached with only tension, gravity, and levity. It's kind of phenomenally and amazingly surprising, no hardware whatsoever. They're an integration of C's experience and surroundings into the work and the work into the environment, as lightly and sensually as possible. The only intentional residues of these works are beauty and emotion. Next up, the lovely Margaret Thompson is a painter living and working in northern New Mexico. Filtering reality through her own mythology, she combines explorations of cosmology, personal ritual, and a reverence to the natural world into small and to large symbolist paintings. Each piece is a tapestry of observations from the artist's daily life that she weaves into a story, inviting viewers to find their own tales within. Working closely to the earth in the desert and often painting outside, Margaret infuses her oil paintings with wax, sand, soil, mica, ash, spices, and plant oils to radiate the essence of the land. And then right next to me, Maya Torres was born and raised in New Mexico and Latin America. She creates cutting-edge and innovative drawings and sculptures. She began showing her work in high school at the Staples Gallery in Taos and has been included in gallery and museum shows throughout the Southwest for the past 25 years. Torres weaves together the precisions of science and the depths of mythology using traditional materials such as bronze, ceramic, and pencil, some of which you can see just on this wall right here. Thank you all for joining us. That's plenty of me. So now we're going to get to a bit into the conversation. Just as a starting question and acknowledging the fact that we are responding to another artist's work, the first question we would like to sort of pose is how you all became aware of Luchita. What was your entry point into her work and her story?
Well, I guess I'll start since I'm closest to Claire. And thank you, everybody, for coming here to listen to this talk and our different opinions about this amazing show that's happening and surrounding an almost hardly known artist named Luchita Hurtado, who I had met in Taos without really knowing the scope of her work. And she was just always kind of a lovely woman that you could just, kind of chum up with and talk. And I feel so blessed that she was here. And now, after having these shows, just kind of researching her work, it's really inspired my sense of outlook on just the ordinary and how to take that into something extraordinary. So for me, that's what Luchita was really great about, kind of juxtaposing simple kind of everyday items like lemons or just her foot with rugs from the Southwest, and how she broke it down and kind of abstracted and almost flattened the image. But they were really powerful, and you could see that she, was really dedicated to her craft on a daily basis, even though she had kids. And she talked about how her kids really inspired her art, which I found that my kids inspired my art through the years, and how that creative nature that they have when they're young is something we often forget when we grow up. I get to hang out with my grandson, and this kid can just pump out 20 drawings in an hour, and I can't even do one in 2 years, so something's the matter. But just seeing her scope of work was really inspirational, and to know that she kept doing it despite she wasn't getting so much recognition, that she just had this drive inside of her that was not going to go away, and she honored that about herself. And what a lesson for all of us to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's true. Kids are so good at just throwing their ideas out there. And I like that she also explored she explored concepts that were meaningful to her and multiple iterations of them. So there's just her relationship to a feather, because she would go outside, pick them up in a park, put them in her hair, and then make multiple works exploring just her love of this simple but beautiful item. I first discovered her work. I was invited to participate in an exhibition in London last year, and the title of the exhibition was "I Look to the Moon Like a Fellow Traveler," and it's a quote by Luchita Hurtado. And when I was invited to create work for the show, I annually go down to Big Bend area to paint, and I go during a full moon. So I traveled down there to create some paintings for the show, and I felt like I was living kind of in parallel with Luchita's moon traveling friend. And I stayed in this wild little cabin built by a cowboy down there, and really kind of janky space. I had to hold on to this railing, side railing, to kind of hoist myself up into this attic bedroom with a little window that looked out over this big mesa, and the moon would rise right over it. So I'd just sit on the little bed up there and watch the moon rise, and then I'd wake up for the moon's set and drive out on the land and watch it as it kind of descended down. So I made paintings in response to that moment, and then I was in London for the exhibition last May, and the city was pretty overwhelming, and I walked into the little gallery. It's called Lamb Gallery, and I walked in and I saw her painting, one of her paintings. The gallery had it on loan, and it was just this little diptych of her beautiful blue sky and the moon emanating, and then above it one of her sky skin paintings of 3 little feathers. And it was so little, and it felt like home. And it was so nice to just walk up to it and just kind of be there with her.
Okay. Honestly, I think I knew Luchita from the stars. Like, we just knew each other in the stars before I knew her here on Earth. So, yeah, I was trying to figure that out. Like, when did I know of her? And I think it could have been when she was having the show at LACMA, or, some of the press around that. I think there was a bubble of information out into the ethers that I probably tacked onto. But I've really gotten to know her since then, and since being invited to participate in the show, which thank you. Thank you for the organizers and supporters and participators. I guess, are we speaking about how we are in conversation with Luchita as well? Because I can go into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were interested in, and I'm hearing it from all 3 responses so far, but that sense of, the word we bandied about a lot in sort of the curatorial talks was kinship. Whether or not the artists themselves felt a kinship with her, or whether we saw it as outsiders to the process, kinship in your works to her works. That was sort of what we were really interested in. And so I think this question, for me anyway, when I was thinking about it, was both how you encountered her, a story of when you first saw her works, but also that where you found that kinship in that process.
Oh, definitely. This bring of the spirituality into the work. That was, like, first off our where I felt the kinship. The parenthood, the way that she worked, and the way that she was consistent and committed to the work. I feel that. I have 2 kids. Also, her love of experimenting and doing new things. That intimacy of making that we have with ourselves when we're trying new things and we're experimenting, and just bringing those things forward in our practices. That I feel that from her. She also was always conducting a search for her own language and then referring back to her own language. That's something that I love to do too. I'm developing a family of ways of putting forms together, and a family of the language of what they mean and how they go together. And so that resonated with me as well. And I think her Sky Skin series was what really resonated for me. And in the piece that I made particularly for this show, because I had 3 works that were already constructed, and I brought those in. And the 4th piece that was made prior to the show, just as months before it was coming together and being installed. And I just felt her through that piece specifically in the way that I was making new forms. I had new processes I was experimenting with. So it was a really lovely experience. And it's a piece that's hanging, and then I have not done a hanging piece before. So that Sky Skin series, to me, has that feeling of levity and that feeling of airiness, and that's what I was translating, I think, in that piece as well. So anyway, thanks.
I think it's also relevant to that piece that there is something in the Sky Skin series where the outer borders can sometimes feel constraining. There's all this spaciousness and there's all this light and openness, but then the outer borders constrain. And I think there is a balance between things that are there and not there that also works for your hanging piece. You spent a lot of time working on the shadows, what is there and what is not there, and that also felt resonant. We got some of that from you as well, Margaret, but the next question that I was curious about, and maybe Maya, you have a specific piece, that there was a particular work or series of Luchitas that inspired you or touched you in particular.
Well, I have to say it never is down to just one piece, but kind of a body of work that they've produced, because that gives kind of a greater scope for me to see their perseverance and dedication to their craft and technique and how they're developing it with ideas. And it was really great for me to see that Luchita didn't what is often called going the commercial route, which you're kind of making something that's going to sell for the gallery that you both can make money at. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But what I saw with her work was that just her dedication to the moment of the inspiration that was happening with her work, and her environment around her, and no doubt that Lee Mulliken inspired her as well, because his art was truly phenomenal and kind of esoteric in a way, where there was this abstract expressionist experimentation going on, where she didn't kind of go in that direction, which was kind of the popular thing to do then. She just really owned the imagery, she owned the subject matter, and she just seemed to really own the material. Like, she knew what she was doing with the paintbrush, where like I like to draw, and I don't feel like the paintbrush cooperates with what I want to do. You can take them back to the art store and say, these brushes just aren't working, I had something else in mind. So to me, when you're discovering what works best for you with your materials or medium or subject matter, and then it just feels comfortable, and I think you start developing your own symbols that will maybe reoccur in your work, or a certain style that reoccurs, or I tend to like just the beauty of graphite on the surface, and I just like that purity, and paint just gets in the way, and color gets in the way, and so do varnishes to protect the drawings, that gets in the way to me of the really essential beauty of the pencil. And I saw that what I liked about Luchita too was that she had this freshness with her sketches, and she was able to translate that kind of freshness into the paintings, and that excitement was still there on the canvas. So to me, that was really inspirational about what I discovered with her work, and just listening to her in documentaries, she just looks like she was a fun person to hang out with, and talk to. And I wish I had recognized more of who she was, rather than in passing. And but I feel really grateful that I was able to meet her, and that she was part of the Taos art scene, because so many people come here to find their creative nature and have moved here to find their creative nature. And it's a really high percentage of women too, single women, that come here. And that she was like partners with this other great artist. I think they really fed off of each other. I think her kids informed her work and just who she was. And we're just so lucky that she was in this valley with our, this whole creative of weaving that's continuing to happen.
No, she's left quite the legacy here, and that was so much of what this show really came out is that legacy. In what you were saying about the material and the purity of material and the importance of material, I feel like that's something, Margaret, that really comes out of your work. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, that you infuse the oil paints with so many other significant materials that maybe don't directly impact the visual quality. They can, but maybe not necessarily, but it's more than that. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I really like it when the paintings are rough and there's a lot of texture that I can play with. The paintings I have in this show are not like that. They're, in response to Luchita's work, they are much softer, and I was really trying to kind of speak with her process of being really intricate with luminosity and like tiny details, and just like coaxing things out, and like the gentleness and poetic nature of speaking with the natural world. But I also experiment a lot with, I go out and I collect palmfuls of earth when I'm on hikes, or in landscapes that I really love. I bring them back to the studio, and then what I like to do is I have this ritual where I'll stretch a canvas with raw linen, and then I'll mix a natural earth pigment into transparent gesso. So it's just like a non-synthetic color. And when the painting is wet, I'll lay it down on the ground, and then I'll go and look through all my little jars in the studio and kind of like touch, like crushed up sandstone or kind of like ash or mica from places that I've been, and I'll throw them down on the canvas. Sometimes I'll take it outside and let the wind come, and like I'll throw chili down on the canvas and the wind will play with it and make patterns on it. I infuse plant oils into it. Smells really good. It's a mess, stuff gets everywhere. And then the surface of the canvas before I start painting with oil paint is just like, it's porous and it's messy and it feels old. And then as I start painting upon it, every brushstroke is in conversation with that rough, earthy texture, and it just feels like this old thing, this thing that's like birthed from the earth. And I want people to touch the work. I had a show recently and some people, came through and we got to go up and like put our hands on it. And it's like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be, perfect. And I want people to smell it. I want it to have like a kind of live on beyond just the paint on the canvas. So yeah, it's a process that I'll keep going with.
As a museum curator, you stress me out when you say you want people to touch it. Actually, my everyday living nightmare. But no, that idea that that it is a full experience, that it's something that touches the senses and engages both you as the creator, but also audience members on multiple levels. I think we can't talk about material without C. We have to touch on your material, because you and I have had many conversations about your deep and personal marriage relationship to your material as being very specific.
That's right. I am in a monogamous relationship with my material. It's one material, and it's going well. So yeah.
That's good. I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah. So the one material, I don't know if anyone is familiar with tall tumble mustard. It's a tumbling plant. Here in the Southwest, a lot of people call it tumbleweed, but I've dropped the weed. And yeah, like that is another way that I feel that I in spirit with Luchita, because her work had a lot to do with nature. It was about nature, spirit of nature, and my work is also about that, and made with raw, pieces of nature that are not very far from their original form. So really just when I'm making the work, I'm trying to keep the essence of the original plant as alive as possible, and I've had a few ways of altering the dried material so that it's either smoked to a darker color or just finely cut and sanded and finished, and it's just very precious to me. I can't express my love for this plant enough, and the future that I feel we have together, because we've been together for coming up on 8 years now, and that's an important number for me too. All of my works are sculptures with titles that add up to 8 in numerology, so that's infinity for me. I spent some time last summer digging even deeper with this one material. I was fortunate enough to be on a material exploration residency and funded to spend my summer finding new ways to put this material together. So that piece that I built for this exhibition highlights cordage and paper that I've learned how to make from the plant. So that's just one piece of what is out there for me next. I'm excited about what's to come. But yeah, no, the footing in nature for me goes back to my childhood. Like I think Luchita speaks about. She speaks about being really in awe of nature as a young child, and also knowing in her being that she's an artist, and I can identify with both of those. So, and never losing connection with that, even though life was sometimes in the way of the practice being, really as regular as I wanted it to be. So yeah.
You're preempting my next question. We
Cool.
perfectly segueing into the conversation of nature. I think that there's so much that in all of our artists that we had in this show that nature sort of interwove very much so. I think for me, in your works that you contributed, Maya, the woman texting God, that centerpiece on this wall really brought out natural aspects, but all of your works also do. So I think let's get into the conversation of nature and the way that plays into it.
Wow. Well, to me, nature is like the greatest artist of all. I'm jealous of nature, really, in a big way, because because there's just so many facets of her, and she's a she. You know, in this male-dominated world, we have Mother Nature, and we're all part of this vast stew of Mother Nature and God existence, whatever you want to call it. And I think that nature is definitely one of my biggest inspirations. Like I live in the mountains, and just my big thrill of every day is getting up to feed the wild birds. And it's like I have to get up by a certain time. If not, they'll come and just jump on the roof and try and wake me up. And so I can't ever really sleep in. Like as a parent, you never really sleep in. And now, like my kids are grown and stuff, and now it's the birds that wake me up. But that's okay, because there's such peace in nature and so much diversity that if anybody ever wants inspiration, I think just walking into nature, either sitting down or just, I remember as a kid going back to these childhood things. I mean, I think my first sculptures I ever made were mud pies, and I was just really obsessed with making mud pies, and I had to make like a certain number every day. And there was this space that I could escape, like my brothers and that whole activity on the side of our house. And I would just go with a little bucket of water, and there were these little ants that would dig these burrows, and then I would use that dirt and watch these ants. They were like spiders that would eat the ants or something. And anyway, so this just interaction with nature as a child, and then this kind of meditative making mud pies every day, as if I had a tortilla factory or something.
Did you eat the mud pies?
I tried to get everyone to eat my mud pies.
Okay. That's how you develop a good immune system as a young child. That's exactly how that happens.
I had an easy bake oven that I baked them in, so that was kind of different. But so right now, yeah, that's good. I think for me right now, I've been really excited too, is like time lapse on these phones and stuff, and gadgets have given us all these different possibilities. So it's a new tool. And so I love to, first thing in the morning, I'll get up and put my phone on the ledge of this very dirty window and record time lapse of the sunrise. And I do a little bit of the birds in the evening, but I'm more infatuated with the way the clouds kind of come up and the way that nature's colors are just like, boom, let's just add some bright red right now. And it was like drab and kind of gray clouds, but then all of a sudden the light gets just so. And to me, nature is like a key, because we're all part of nature. And then just observing how nature works, I know I could never put that sunrise into a painting. I might be able to do a short film or something, but to put it into a painting, it would never have that ambiance. It would never have that kind of quickness of change of color. And of course, the time lapse allows you to see it very quickly. So, 2 hours in like 20 seconds. It just really changes your kind of interaction with the sunrise. So now I'm just obsessed with these sunrises. You can see them on TikTok. It's down. Anyway.
Well, and the generation of those strong emotions, we very much see it in Luchita's work. Then she gets not only obsessed and enamored with nature, but also very protective and defensive, and leads into her ecological work and sort of this defiance of, sort of humankind's demand to dominate nature.
Right.
Who is so beautiful and so inspiring, as you say. I think something that, Margaret, that you mentioned earlier about the wind actually having a hand in painting your works, it seems very critical that nature is not only something that you pull from, but also you give to.
I'm really interested in what the energy of nature looks like. If you were to look at a mountain and close your eyes and forget what it looked like, but how it felt, and the heat or the cold around it, and what that could look like if you were to visualize it, if it was a shape, if it was a symbol, if it was a series of lines. Is it dancing? Is it quiet? How does it move? How does the imagined energy of the water interact with the imagined energy of the grasses on the side of the river? And I've been exploring this sort of kind of transcendental relationship to nature in my work over the past couple of years, because it just feels good. It's that kind of communication with the beyond, the mystery, but then like the beauty of kind of creating whatever you want that could be, because we don't really know. We have no idea. We're all grappling with that in some capacity. And then we have beautiful rituals like feeding the birds and like falling in love with the sunrise and capturing it on time lapse. I broke my phone because I had 40,000 photos of nature and I had to get a new one, and it's breaking again because there's twice as many. And that's a beautiful relationship, to be texting God, in some capacity. Yeah, how can we not love it? It's us. It's a self-portrait in some capacity. It's nourishing to be creating work about the natural world, to go out and spend deep time with it often and prioritize that and make that kind of like the purpose to get up and go and to listen. Just be quiet. Just be out there and listen, because it's breathing. And so that's nature is in almost all the paintings I make, whether it's that surreal energy interplay, these kind of elemental pieces, or it's the foundation of a figurative piece where someone's out on the land just like feeling free.
Yeah. And something that you are also mentioning is that the element of the spirituality, which is so much, I think, a cornerstone of Luchita's work, and the symbolism. I think that's something that you really draw on, and that further connection. I think something else I was curious about when I was thinking about the opportunity to have you three here and be able to grill you is this aspect that there is a difference in working in one's practice in sort of the established modes of working, but then also Margaret, you both created new works for this show. Maya, you contributed works to this show, and you modified one of them specifically for this show. The difference in your normal habit of practice versus creating with another artist's work in mind, because that's a very different pattern. Anyone want to start?
I will.
Go. Okay, good.
Yeah, so, we were chatting about this before. I think this is a good place to bring it in.
We did a little bit of prep.
Really, participating in this project has really expanded my practice in researching Luchita and her work. And I just feel like now I am one of her students. She's one of my teachers. And that piece that's in there is so very different from the line of work that I was making just prior to that, and in the history of that, working with with my one material. And it just came together at the right time. Like I had learned some new processes, and then I had a new teacher. So it was perfect timing to get outside of any kinds of restraints or rules that I put on myself, which I do, a lot of rules. And it was so fun. It was so fun. And I'm just amazed that it came together. I feel like her hand was along with mine, as was the spirit that's along with all of us, and I really felt that. So,
well, and I think something we were talking about before, but in the curatorial process, we felt like I felt anyway, that we would zero in on her work, study her work, try to pull out themes and think about her work, and then we would leave her and look at the work of the artist that we were going to include in the show, and this is an opportunity again to sort of move back toward her again in a little bit of a wave form. And I think especially with that work of yours, that we installed in the other gallery, there was also so much devotion in that piece. I can be funny about it, but truly, it was, we would.
It took some time.
Yes, it did. Installing it, your head tilted back. The neck ache was quite special, and
feet too. We're up on a ladder for hours.
On the ladder for hours. It took at least 2 full days to really get it right, and then lighting. And the cordage breaking.
Thank you
for
your help.
Well, but it was wonderful to watch your devotion, and it did kind of give me a chance to meditate on the devotion of someone who's, and it was mentioned before, but maybe didn't get the recognition artistically. That practice was, in the wee hours after everyone else's needs were taken care of, and that kind of devotion was something we talked about in the curatorial team. But it did remind me that every artist to maintain a practice must have that devotion and must have that commitment and must have that obsession or love or however it is that it manifests. But it really came out, I think, in the installation of that particular work.
I think it's like if you're doing the work, it's there. It doesn't have to be conjured. It's just there. Hours go by and we don't even notice, I'm sure most artists can identify with that. It was a lot of hours installing, and we had to make some changes too, and there were some challenges, but we got through it, and really happy how it turned out. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, and the result was so worth it, and I think that's something that I've seen in interviews with Luchita. This idea that I think there was one particular interview where she's regret nothing, that the career and the work itself is worth it. That any sort of other additional outcome is maybe a benefit, maybe a plus, but ultimately irrelevant. Margaret and Maya, how did it feel for you to work directly in sort of response to a specific another artist's work?
Go ahead.
So I had seen one of her paintings in London last May, and I loved it. It was just like really soft and like the entry point, really nice little intimate entry point. I went to the opening of the retrospective at the Harwood in, July, and was able to really spend time with the work up close. And her attention to detail and the teeniest bits of light on her feathers, and just like how soft she's able to render clouds. I was really studying her relationship to her medium. So when I went to make the 2 paintings that I made for this exhibition, I wanted to have that kind of soft, intimate relationship with my paint. I also wanted to get to know Taos a little bit better. I'm down in Santa Fe, and I spend some time up here, but this summer I spent 2 days just sitting outside and studying the Taos Mountain. And then I went down to the hot springs and had this exercise where I would get in the hot water for a little while, then get in the river and stare at the sky for a little while, and then get out and make a drawing. And then I'd get in the hot water, the cold water, make a drawing. And I did that maybe 6-7 times. And 2 of the drawings really stuck to me. And there was a little line of water droplets in both drawings that I realized when I put them together, they connected, kind of like an umbilical cord. And then I thought of Luchita as mother, and I thought of mother and daughter, and made this kind of these surreal landscape paintings. One is kind of the essence of a mom, and the other a daughter, and they connect.
Well, and I think especially you talking about the intimacy, that was something else that we discovered when you came here and you visited the space and we were talking about this project. We looked at both Margaret's paintings are in these 2 alcoves back at the back of the room, and that was something that you picked up on. You were very excited about having this little space that is off from the rest, that has this intimacy, and those 2 alcoves speak to one another. They're directly connected. They're across from one another, in some ways opposed, but in some ways united in that same sort of framing, in that same sort of space. And so it really feels perfectly aligned with the way that you talk about encountering Luchita's paintings as being an intimate entry into a sort of a secret world, and we got to kind of replicate that as well as with the material that you produced. Maya?
Well, I think just the process of Luchita, again, I'm going back to this, and just her body of work. And I was also really inspired that she was a mom, too, and pretty much going through art school. You know, it was pretty much assumed that if you were a woman artist, you were not going to have kids, right? And you were, going to do this like solo journey through life, and maybe not a partner, and it's just me and the art, like you said, you and your tumbleweeds, you grab onto the creative process, and that's something she did. And when there is that drive, you're just going to stay up late, or you're going to include your kids in the process, which was really, for me, super informative because of their kind of free will for working with materials and their lack of hesitation to just pick up a brush and go at it. And, then you go to art school and everyone's like, looking at the canvas for hours, which I do, So I think there was a spontaneity I saw in her work that really kind of inspired me to complete that piece with the butterflies, because I was kind of working on it. And I think I selected pieces that were more about nature because it seemed like she kind of tuned in about that. And I just really especially liked how she depicted her point of view on the scene. It wasn't just like anybody ordinary, like a foot was in there. And I remember doing a lot of photos when we traveled in Latin America, and I would put my foot in the scene just to give the scope of how big that valley was, or how big Machu Picchu was, or something. And I remember people laughing about that, but I needed a reference point for the photograph because there wasn't just that. It wasn't as good as Ansel Adams to grab onto like foreground, middle ground, background. So that perspective of hers just really inspired me. And I saw this documentary where her son was talking about her work. And I guess Lee Mulliken took him to go to his mom's studio, which he had never really seen before. And he walked in, and the body of work was like his mom naked on these paintings. And so it kind of rattled his grounding a little bit, but also opened his eyes to what his mom was doing when she wasn't there with him. He had no idea that she was making all these paintings. And that perspective of his was like, there was my mom naked on all these canvases, and he didn't quite know how to deal with that I think he was maybe 9 or something like that. But I started thinking, I wonder how my kids dealt with some of like theme shows. Like, in a way, this is a theme show, and there are often times when you'll make something specific for the show, like this upcoming show that Paula Lopez is going to help curate. And I thought maybe I should do some Mesoamerican imagery, and I usually will tie in what I've done with the show, and because there's often not enough time to really complete something sometimes for a specific theme show. But I mean, Taos used to be big on these theme shows and stuff, and apartheid shows, and if something was going on in the world, we would have these fundraiser shows, and then be real specific about the artwork you made for those. So I'm thinking, I don't know if Luchita's generation was partly like that, but there was a sense of camaraderie, I think, that she had with her generation of artists that I think used to exist a little bit more than it does now. And that's something I really miss, is that kind of camaraderie of just, what kind of pastels are you working with, and what kind of teal green are you using to get some of like these pastels like Margaret Ness makes, and like, how do you do that, and that kind of interaction is so important. And I think that, and I may just be out of the circle, but I think Taos used to have a lot more of that going on. And it was maybe because we all drank, I don't know.
It was because you had a gallery. What happened? We need to have those theme shows again.
That helps, yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, no, that kind of interaction. That it's good to have a party every once in a while. Yeah, no, you need that. You need that. Well, I think something you were saying about that the influence of her being a mother, and also that female perspective. I mean, for me, when you brought your pieces in and we were going to photograph them, I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe it was because it was smaller images, but Woman Texting God and La Mujer, there's a smaller image of Woman Texting God in La Mujer. Yeah, and I hadn't noticed that before. But there was a layer to me where it's a woman looking at a woman, so much like Luchita looking at herself. And that female gaze, that unique perspective that maybe we don't always get presented in the art world, but that being really critical in her own looking at herself and looking at other women and looking at history and kind of connecting those things. And I think that was something, ultimately, the longer that I've really thought about it, the biggest revelation for me in Luchita's work is this kind of understanding of interconnectedness. And that is something that I think we've kind of touched on throughout all of our responses and through this conversation, but that aspect of interconnectedness with nature, being a relative to a tree, not just relative to a tree, but again, kin to a tree, and kin to those in history, her sort of self-discovery through sort of examining potential indigenous heritage in the Amazon and her connection with the people of the Southwest, the native people of the Southwest. Her art really reveals and investigates that connection. I was wondering how you all feel about that principle of connection and interconnectedness, and whether your art serves the same sort of mechanical function.
I'll go. Well, just to bounce off of what Maya was saying, I think that our community is really important, and that's why we're here today. Thank you, Claire, Millicent Rogers, Harwood, all the people involved, TAAC. TAAC has done an amazing job of building community in our small town and in all of New Mexico. So big thanks to that. It feels really good to know a community here, and I think it's still here. I think that we're finding ways of gathering again differently, maybe, and it's really impressive. So happy to be part of it. And but as far as being connected in the oneness, when Luchita says she's a relative of a tree, I think several of her perspectives have influenced me, and that's one of them. And her perspective in space, her perspective of our humanity in just in partnership with all of nature. There's not a dividing line. Personally, I'm doing a lot of research into our relationship to plants and our shared DNA and our shared sensate abilities. So it's fascinating. It's a line of work that's going on quietly in the world that doesn't get a lot of press, but it really reminds me that we are all one, and we are all here under this one energy, and it's just dipping into her work. I really feel that. So thank you.
No, I remember, it's something I think about often, but as a child, someone explaining to me that, we are mirror images to so many plants, that we are rooted in the ground. We have trunks that move fluids up and down, and, that sort of, they inhale what we exhale. Mm-hmm. The people who really understand plant medicine and can cure what hurts us through their material, it is a really extraordinary give and take.
Yeah, we inhale what they exhale, and they inhale what we exhale. It's a infinity loop, and so much of our planet is that way, and I think it's becoming more recognized. So, yeah.
I think we just need each other, and there's so many systems in place that separate us from the way that we were more connected. Maybe when you had a gallery and people were coming together and drinking at the salons, and before we were on our phones all the time, which does connect us, actually, in many ways. I I love Luchita's work in that regard. I think a lot about interconnectivity in like tri-world experiences. So like we have our cosmology and, you know, far out spaciousness, and then our terrestrial world, and we're all here, humans sitting in this room together, and then what's happening beneath in the kind of unconscious state. And I like to make art about that. It feels really whole and full. It's really nourishing. That's, I guess, what I'm exploring right now. I don't really have the words for it quite fully, but I'm working in symbols that are interacting with one another in this tri-world sort of energy, interconnected, up-down motion. The surrealist painter Leonora Carrington also worked in this way, and I was able to go to her home and conduct research in Mexico City last year and studied some quiet embroideries that she had, where she was also doing these kind of levels of consciousness, all connected. So, yeah.
In talking about Mesoamerican beliefs and symbols and material, that always makes me think of that tri-world division and how the ruler was believed to be the axis of the world, the axis mundi, the connecting point. And I think that artists, when they are really in and channeling the right sort of material for their own work, for their own practice, can do the same thing, talking about the above, the here, and the below, and the, you know, subconscious, and really tapping those things in and connecting those worlds and being a point of connection. And that's something that I think gets drawn out a lot in that sort of archaeological and anthropological study, which Luchita really cherished.
Absolutely. And you can see that kind of universal vision in her work, and the way that she was able to put it on canvas was really remarkable. I'm surprised she didn't get more notoriety when she was alive, because she hung out with the big boys. She hung out with all the big artists, you know, and I'm sure she was part of their conversations and part of their dinners and all that. And I bet she was quite recognized and respected by them, because she had almost in a sense her own singular point of view. And in so many ways, I mean, we are that access. Each person is that access. And part of, I think, our journey is to find out how our access connects up with the microcosm access and the macrocosm access, because I think that there is a trinity that exists in each person and maybe in each life force, you know, where you have the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and then the spiritual area. And I think that, you know, the art that she did was her seeking her place in the universe. And I think for me, not always, but for me, a lot of the best art really is able to express that kind of in-between worlds, and that seeking of, it's an existential search by each person. And so each artist, when they approach their materials or their subject matter, or whether it's performance or letting the wind come in to do some of the work, or recognizing this tumbleweed is really got this life force in it that needs to be expressed, and you're like the channel for it. So I think in some ways we're just like channeling. Once you get to that place of openness and creativity, you're just like channeling God's energy. My grandson really put it beautifully and succinctly the other day. He said, you know, Nana, Jesus is in our hearts and God is in our brain, so I'm never afraid, though he is still afraid of the dark. But, you know, but that he said that, and that he has this recognition of those two natures, or even himself, and how that works. So he's only 6, you know, and my granddaughter is like 18 months, so she's not expressing herself like verbally, but her mannerisms and stuff are just so perfectly there. And so I think part of our quest, and that what Luchita did, was finding your own source and how we all fit in with this universal stew, which seems to be infinite, you know. I just think some of the things they're doing now, where you can hooks something up to the plants, and they have songs. Have you seen those? If you haven't, just Google it. It's just remarkable. And so they have like the red mushroom song and the redwood song and whatever. I guess you can buy these too. I think I want to buy one. And then I will be gone. I'll be just in the forest, talking to the plants. And so I think that part of creativity that she unleashed in herself was just really inspirational for everyone who came into visual contact with it, because it is a visual language, and she did it well. She did it well, and I think every person who attempts it does it well. Just because you're trying to do it, just that expression in itself is so important. And then if you have that little voice in your head that never stops talking, and you just got to keep making the art. And I just keep thinking, oh, that show up in Denver, that'll be my last show. I'm not going to do anymore. I'm tired of hauling stuff around. And then I got invited to do a mural on a Freemason wall up there. So you just like stuff will open up, and that we're part of the whole universe was, I think, part of the expression that we all have in this show, and that maybe was your vision of doing this particular exhibit and the one at the Harwood too.
Well, and the work is critical to that. It's feeling that connection and expressing it, and then going back and trying again. Well, this was an incredibly wonderful and lovely conversation. I think that's a beautiful note to end on, is our feeling of interconnectedness and our feeling of gratitude to have you all here today and have all of you here today. This was a really wonderful project, and we got to have work that has never been in this space. And it has been extremely, extremely special to collaborate with the Harwood Museum and TAAC. Again, we can talk about how incredible TAAC are to make things happen. They really make things happen. So we are really very, very grateful, and grateful to all of the artists who showed with us. This was a free program. So of course, your donations to the museum are always appreciated. Your donations to our efforts to support those friends and relatives in LA. Do you want to say some more words about that? Just a reminder?
Sure. Just a reminder again. We, TAAC, is joining and partnering with See You Next Thursday, which is a platform for auctioning art. And we're accepting donations to be auctioned or for sale on our website. All monies will be going to help victims of the fire in Los Angeles. More information on our website, Taos Abstract Artist Collective.org. Did I forget anything? Thank you.
No. Yes. And in addition, this is not the end of our programming associated with Luchita and her incredible work. Next Sunday, January 26th, at the Harwood Museum of Art, 2 p.m. as well, we have another talk with artists who knew her and were connected with her in her life. So more of that kind of personal connection and relation to her work, as well as their own practices. So come back for that, not here, but at the Harwood. That's going to be continuing this project. So thank you all so much again. We have catalogs of this show. If you are completely enchanted with the works, like obviously I am, we have catalogs for sale, as well as signed catalogs by the artist on the table over there.
And if anyone in the audience or on YouTube has any questions, feel free to ask them. You can
Any
raise
questions?
your hand, and I'll bring over a microphone to you if you have any questions.
We just
You
did a
did
really
answer
good job.
everything.
We just did a really good job. We just covered everything. Interconnectedness, the universe, cosmos, etc.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so very much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for coming.